Welcome back to UK Homicide. In 2008, Sabina and Ursula Eriksson were at the center of a series of bizarre events that captured the imagination of not only the UK and Europe, but the wider world. For ad-free listening, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts. The Eriksson twins were born in 1967 and reportedly had normal lives as they grew up in Sweden. They had an elder sister, Mona, and an elder brother named Bjorn. Ursula relocated to the USA, and Sabina settled in County Cork, Ireland, with her partner and children. There was nothing in their past to predict or explain what was to happen. On the 16th of May 2008, Ursula visited her sister Sabina in Ireland. The twin sisters then secretly left Sabina's house for unknown reasons and took the ferry to Liverpool, England. After arriving at their destination, Ursula and Sabina went to the St. Anne Street police station to file a report concerning the safety of Sabina's children and the fight she had with her partner. At midday, the identical twins boarded a National Express coach traveling from Liverpool to London. Whilst on the bus, their behavior got stranger. They had a bag with them which they were holding tightly. The bus staff asked them about it, but they would not let anyone touch it. At one point, this interaction escalated, and the driver asked them to get out when they reached Kiel services on the M6. Shortly after, the pair were seen on motorway cameras. They were walking down the central reservation with traffic traveling at high speeds alongside them. This was followed by the twins unexpectedly running, without hesitation, into the fast lane of the motorway. Ursula initially managed to dodge traffic, but Sabina was struck by a Seat Leon. Shortly after police arrived, the women again ran onto the motorway and were again struck by oncoming vehicles, Ursula by the wheels of a lorry. And seconds later, Sabina landed on the bonnet and into the windscreen of a VW before being tossed high into the air and landing hard in the third lane of traffic. Both women somehow survived. As emergency services came to Sabina's aid, she struck an officer in the face and again ran into the traffic. Ursula screamed, spat, and scratched officers in an attempt to resist medical treatment. After restraint, Sabina began shouting that they were going to steal her organs and, "I recognize you, you're not real."
It's disturbing and it's endlessly fascinating.
40-year-old identical twins from Sweden wandered out onto one of Britain's busiest motorways.
If you've just run into the highway and been smashed, how is it possible that they can get up from that kind of assault?
Adding to the mayhem, the twins begin hitting and spitting at police officers and screaming about people not being real.
Delusional words, "They're going to kill me, they're going to steal your organs."
The M6 northbound was closed for over 4 hours to allow an air ambulance to attend to Ursula. The police would later say that their strength was superhuman, and they believed their actions were part of a joint self-exit plan. When Sabina reached hospital by road ambulance, she was much calmer and was rather nonchalant about her sister's critical condition. Both women tested negative for drugs or alcohol, and a background medical history search showed no evidence of mental illness. 5 hours later, Sabina was discharged from the hospital and taken into police custody. On May 19, 2008, she attended the magistrate's court where she pleaded guilty to the charges of trespass on a motorway and assaulting a police officer. She was sentenced to 1 day in prison. However, as she had already spent a night in the cells, she was allowed to walk free. A free woman, Sabina began wandering in an apparent attempt to locate her sister. Around 7 p.m. that day, two men, 54-year-old Glenn Hollinshed and his friend Peter Malloy, were out on a dog walk and spotted Sabina. She approached them and asked the two men if they had directions for any hotels or bed and breakfasts. Self-employed welder Glenn Hollinshed, who had previously been a paramedic, took pity on Sabina and offered her a safe place at his home in Fenton for the night. The men, however, were alarmed by her behavior in the house, as she was constantly looking out the window. Mr. Malloy left around midnight, leaving Glenn Hollinshed and Sabina alone. The next day, Glenn tried to help Sabina find her sister, with the help of his brother, Paul, who worked at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire. But at 7:40 p.m. whilst dinner was being prepared, and just after he had asked a neighbor for tea bags, Sabina stabbed 54-year-old Glenn in the head 4 times with a kitchen knife. He managed to leave the house, telling a neighbor, "She stabbed me," before he collapsed. Sabina fled the scene with a hammer in hand, which she reportedly struck herself in the head with several times. Mr. Holinshed's neighbors contacted the police. A passing driver attempted to stop and take control of Sabina, but she used a roof tile in her pocket to strike him in the head. The pursuit came to an end at Heron Cross, where she jumped from a 40-foot-high bridge onto the A50. She was hospitalized at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire with fractures to both legs. On the 6th of June 2008, while still in hospital, Sabina was arrested. Upon discharge on the 11th of September 2008, at which point she was taken into custody and formally charged with murder of Glenn. Ursula was also released from hospital in September, and she relocated uneventfully back to Sweden and then the US. Later that month, Sabina would plead guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility. At trial, both the prosecution and defense agreed that she was insane at the time, though was deemed sane by the time of the trial. She had no answers for her actions or Glenn's murder. In a UK courtroom first, Sabina's lawyers claimed Sabina was a secondary sufferer of folie à deux, with her sister Ursula being the primary sufferer whose presence or perceived presence influenced Sabina. This joint or shared psychosis results in the transfer of delusional beliefs from one individual to another. Consequently, Sabina was highly susceptible to influence and was only acting this way because of her twins' actions.
Folie à deux, madness of two, literally from the French, is a shared psychotic disorder. Psychotic delusions from one person are transmitted to another. One sister is literally influencing the other.
It's a fascinating theory, but a controversial one.
There really is just anecdotal evidence that this is what is going on.
Sabina was sentenced to 5 years in Bronzefield Women's Prison by Mr. Justice Saunders, who said, "I understand that this sentence will seem entirely inadequate to the relatives of the deceased. However, I have sentenced on the basis that the reason for the killing was the mental illness, and therefore the culpability of the defendant is low, and therefore the sentence I have passed is designed to protect the public." He added, "While the mental illness resolved quickly, both psychiatrists agree it was serious and that she behaved in the way she did because of her illness. Her culpability for her behavior is, on the medical evidence, accordingly low. She was suffering from delusions which she believed to be true, and they dictated her behavior. It is also not one of those cases where the defendant could have done something to avoid the onset. It had a sudden onset. It was a serious illness while it lasted, and it resolved rapidly. It is not designed to reflect the grief the relatives have suffered or to measure the value of Mr. Holinshed's life. No sentence that I could pass could do that. It is a sentence which I hope fairly measures a truly tragic event." Glenn Holinshed's brother Gary was critical of the justice system, which he viewed as enabling the murder, stating, "We don't hold her responsible. The same as we wouldn't blame a rabid dog for biting someone. She is ill and to a large degree not responsible for her actions. But her mental disorder should have been recognized much earlier. I do question the criminal justice system for allowing somebody like this to be let out when she is capable of committing such a crime. Her mental condition should have been properly assessed after what she did on the motorway and the experiences the police had. Her mental disorder should have been picked up prior to her being let out into the community. Glenn saw Eriksson in distress and was just trying to help." Sabina eligible for release in 2011, having spent 439 days in custody ahead of the trial and sentencing. Because of the complexity of this case, now is a good time to recap and summarize the main timeline and events. May 16, 2008, at 2 a.m., the twins left Sabina's County Cork homes. Saturday, May 17, 2008, 8:30 a.m. The women go to St. Anne Police Station in Liverpool so Sabina could file a report over concerns about her children. At midday, they board a National Express coach to Victoria Station in London. 1 p.m. The coach stops at Kiel Services on the M6 an hour into the journey, and the women were asked to disembark. 3 hours later, Ursula had run onto the carriageway in front of a lorry and Sabina in front of a silver Volkswagen Polo. After regaining consciousness, Sabina again runs across the carriageway, punching a female officer as she tries to stop her. Both are taken to hospital by air and road ambulance. 2 days later, on Monday, May 19, 2008, Sabina is charged with assaulting a police officer and trespassing onto a motorway. She appears before North Staffordshire magistrates at Fenton, is sentenced to 1-day custody and released. The same day at 7 p.m., she strikes up a conversation with Glenn Holinshed and his friend Peter Molloy, and they all go back to Glenn's home in Duke Street. At 11:40 p.m., Mr. Molloy leaves the property. Tuesday, May 20th, Glenn phones his brother, who worked at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire, and asks him if he can find out what ward Ursula is on. At 7:40 p.m., Glenn goes outside and asks neighbor, Frank Booth, for some tea bags. Mr. Booth is washing his minibus and asks him to wait until he is finished. Glenn goes back into the house, but only 74 seconds later he comes back out of the house saying, "She stabbed me." 9 minutes later, paramedics on their way to Glen see Sabina standing on an island between two carriageways near Heron Cross roundabout. She is hitting herself on the head with a large hammer. She climbs the railings and jumps down to the A50. Glen is found deceased at 8:05 p.m. Friday, June 6, 2008. Sabina is arrested while still a patient at the University Hospital of North Staffordshire. 3 months later, upon discharge, she is formally charged with the murder of Glenn Holinshed. Tuesday, September 1, 2009, the trial starts at Nottingham Crown Court. To this day, this case continues to raise more questions than have ever been answered. These include: why did Ursula and Sabina travel to the UK from Ireland and head for London without telling anyone? Why did Sabina commit murder while separated from Ursula? Was the defense of shared psychosis believable, especially given she was sane at the time of trial? Do you believe a 5-year sentence was adequate? Should the public know where the twins now live? Sabina was struck 3 times by oncoming traffic, got up each time, and still required 6 people to restrain her. Ursula, after having both her legs broken, continued to fight violently, seemingly oblivious to injuries. How could this be? Does the belief of thinking oneself to be invulnerable cause it to be possible, or was this so-called superhuman strength due to willpower alone?
The sisters have never spoken publicly about their unforgettable rampage, and they may be the only ones who will ever know the truth behind it.
Thank you for listening to this strange case and remembering Glenn Holinshed, the often forgotten victim behind the many headlines. What do you think of this case and the many remaining questions? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Bye.